Hello, everybody. Welcome to our first jurors presentation with Dimensions juror David Freeman. My name is Maya Stark, and I'm one of the exhibitions coordinators for the Saskatchewan Craft Council. Before we begin, I want to note that we have closed captions enabled for this webinar. If you would like to use closed captions, please find and click the closed captions button at the bottom or side of your screen. Then click Show Subtitles. You can also change the settings for the captions here and make the font size larger if you wish. While the closed captions are certainly helpful, they do move fast. If reading these isn't providing the accessibility you need, there is another option. To have a full transcript of the presentation, find the red Live on Otter AI button. This might appear as a red button in the top left corner of your screen, depending on what device you are joining us from. Click the small triangle next to the live button, then click View Stream on Otter AI. A new browser window will appear, which will transcribe the entire presentation, and you can review this at your own pace. Simply open it and keep it to the side of the Zoom window. I want to now take this time to acknowledge that the land on which I am on and on which the Saskatchewan Craft Council occupies is Treaty 6 territory. This is the traditional territory of numerous First Nations peoples, including Plains and Woods Cree, Dene, Nakota, Sato, and Anishinaabe, as well as the homeland of the Métis Nation. We are all treaty people. All Canadians have responsibilities to this relationship. Acknowledging traditional territory and this relationship is only one of many steps to recognize the land's history, challenge the legacies of colonialism, and to pay respects to the Indigenous peoples whose practices and spiritualities continue to develop, grow, and contribute to this land. I want to thank our sponsors, Creative Saskatchewan and the City of Saskatoon. Your support is greatly appreciated. So let's talk about Dimensions. Dimensions is the Saskatchewan Craft Council's biennial, open, juried, touring exhibition of contemporary craft, which encourages and rewards excellence in handcrafted work. This year, our Dimensions program has moved online, which has been challenging, as many of you know. Thank you for your patience with that process, and thank you for all of your submissions. The talent and craftsmanship in this province is incredible, and we are so proud to be a part of this program, which encourages and rewards such excellent making. And thank you to our jurors for rising to the challenge. Next week, David Freeman and Jane Kidd will be reviewing all submissions and making some very difficult decisions, selecting only 35 pieces to be a part of the Dimensions touring exhibition. This year, we have had 130 entries by 83 artists. Before I turn things over to our juror, David Freeman, I want to introduce a little bit more light housekeeping in regards to this virtual event tonight. During this presentation, you are able to use the chat box to send messages. However, if you have a question for David, please don't use the chat box, but instead click on the Q&A button, which should appear at the bottom or side of your screen. There, you can type your question and we will attend to all questions after David's presentation. Now, I am honored to introduce David Freeman. David joins us from Tagaska, Saskatchewan. David has custom-built exquisite musical instruments since 1980, training emerging luthiers since 1986. He builds with traditional and alternative woods, always researching new sound concepts and drawing from various master craftspeople. His craft practice is one of experimentation and a deep respect for process and technique. Thank you, David, for joining us tonight, and I will hand things over to you.
Thank you very much, Maya. I'm quite honored to be selected as a juror in this very difficult year of not actually being able to hold craft in my hands. It's going to be a big challenge, and I'm up for it. I hope it's going to be interesting because pictures are so two-dimensional and craft is so three-dimensional and tactile. I tonight want to give you a little bit of insight into my background and how I got to where I am now. And so in selecting pictures, I decided I was going to do a video. I've done a few videos. I've got a YouTube channel on my website, mostly for teaching people how to do little bits of things on guitars. But so I made this video up, and it's about 10 minutes. I thought we could watch that. If there's any images in the video that you want brought up later, I can bring them up. I've got that folder open. and we can discuss anything that you want to discuss about them. So I'm looking forward to your questions. I'm going to share this screen now. You ready? You got it now?
Yes, we have it.
Okay. And we're gonna play and go full screen. I have had music in my life since I can remember. I began playing piano at 5, guitar at 15. Summers were spent at Lake of the Woods, where my mother kept the children busy carving wood or pipestone, a form of soapstone, or braiding and other hand skill crafting projects. I began setting up and repairing my own instruments at 15. I spent a winter in Northern Ontario as a trapper's assistant, relying on our own skills and living in the woods. I attended the University of Winnipeg in a BA program and the University of Saskatchewan in the Fine Arts program. I attended guitar repair and design in Vermont to learn the process of building an instrument. Much of my skill background has been compiled working informally with artists, doing the tasks to develop skills. My second mentor influence, after my mother, was Stan Tanawa, a potter in Winnipeg. Stan introduced me to pottery, as well as learning to have a critical eye for form, function, and process. Stan also taught me to discover the art in everything, even kicking out rolls of roofing, appreciating all that life has to offer. I did pottery part-time for 3 years. I was in Saskatchewan by then and decided there were too many potters here, so I turned my focus to lutherie. I spent a winter with Mark Claremont, a wood carver in Nova Scotia. Here I learned varieties of wood and their working properties. I learned to create fine detailed miniature pieces that, when grouped, created a whole picture impact for the viewer. I discovered and resolved that the basic hand skills can be transferred in media once the properties of that media are comprehended and experimented with. I moved to Saskatchewan to work in furniture restoration, wanting to learn more about wood. On my own time, I did instrument repairs. I began Timeless Instruments in 1980. Having assisted teaching furniture refinishing classes, I confidently opened a School of Lutherie in 1986. Unable to get materials I needed for this, I began processing timber into lutherie wood sizes for myself. It soon became apparent there was a demand for this product in Canada, so I began a lutherie supply business shipping wood through the mail. Teaching has been rewarded in that I could experiment with designs and ideas without the worry of having to sell it to feed my family. It also forced me to learn many different techniques so that I could guide people through the pitfalls of what to do or not do. I tend to go through phases of working with ideas and a technique. Building an instrument is a long process, so varied from day to day, it requires a variety of skills to be honed. In the finishing process, I played with color in the finish from the traditional cherry sunburst, popular on so many electric guitars, to what I call an aquaburst of blue and yellow, which also gives me some greens. In some cases, the blue oxidized to purple over time. Color enhances figured wood, giving it depth as well as contrast. Color, both natural and artificial, stimulates the viewer, bringing them in to observe the piece. An instrument is a functional art piece. The viewer has to be attracted to the object before they pick it up. It is also a sculptural piece that is meant to be handled. The weight, the balance, the comfort of holding it in position, and the actual ease of function to create music. That is the acoustic sound. That is sculpting sound, which is my favorite media. Creating responsive, dynamic, articulated, separated, yet balanced acoustic sound over 4 octaves. A tool for a musician to create music on. Part of the tradition of musical instrument decoration is inlay. This allows me to use all kinds of media to create patterns, scenes, and concepts. This repetitive pattern of a rosette made of colored wood forms the timeless T on the white holly surrounded by rosewood and orange osage bordered by black, white, black purfling pieces. The tangential grain has a softer texture than an end grain.
The Celtic knot pattern repeats itself, forming a very engaging pattern. Creating an oblong circle was an exercise to see what it looks like and keep it even. I used 5 species of wood to get the variation of color. Using the same basic strips and bringing them into the circle at different angles changes the uniqueness of each rosette. The borders of black, white, black are important to frame the rosette. Without them, everything floats uncomfortably, similar to a hypnotic pattern. Inlay on the headstock can be more than just a branding logo. Lady Time has an agate for her hair, a mother of pearl face, brass fixtures, a crystal ball for the future, and a numberless clock for timelessness. Her abalone dress stands on a lightning bolt, my symbol for action like the speed of light, one of my catchphrases. The lightning bolt incorporates into the TI logo and sound hole openings on resonator guitars. Since 2010, I started wedging the body, similar to a harp body, to create separation of the bass and treble sound waves. In 2014, I added a rolled-topped armrest that makes it comfortable to fit under the strumming arm for players' comfort as the bass side gets very wide. A deep cutaway crowds the treble. This even more accommodates the smaller treble sound waves. This opens room for the midsection, resulting in an even response from the lowest bass note to the highest treble note. The side port changes not only the basic fundamental of the body, the reverse of blowing across a bottle, then making the bottle cavity larger. I keep the cavity the same size and change the opening. It also changes the directional projection of the instrument, acts as a monitor for the player, and tonal response is changed. My current area of research is comparing the ratio of the side port to the sound hole with the resulting effect of tone. The shaman tree inlay I did as I felt I was wrapping too many parcels for the mail and wanted a creative outlet, has 4 cultures of shaman from around the world. The mystic spirit world has been interpreted in every culture in different yet similar forms. The theme of spirit is universal. Sculpturally, I have done carvings like this raven head. It is chiseled in yellow cedar. Sculpture of this size is usually a commission. The lion's head is on a walnut harp. The Lent, Pentecost, and Advent pieces were done for a church foyer. They are rotated with each of the seasons. Lent shows the scenes of Jesus' work and prayers. Pentecost portrays the influence of a Christian's everyday life for most of the year. Advent is the 4 candles, lit one each week to celebrate a different theme of contemplation and fruition. While in New Zealand, I took up jade carving. Again, working with a skilled artist to develop my understanding of the rock. Some I have used on the headstock as inlay, leaving a void behind it so that backlighting it shows its translucency. I started with the themes of fishhooks, ferns, koru, and the circles, then added my own ideas as I progressed. I still have some raw jade waiting for time to make more of this. The nestling hearts has a silver chain of the infinity symbol, suggesting the ideal of eternal love. The mermaid fishhook is riding a wave in the form of a heart. The braided tie for the necklace is traditionally flax leaf. Here, innovation can vary the knot used to secure the jade to the nylon rope and look appealing. The double twist with a whale's tail is a traditional New Zealand symbolism. This piece of sterling silver is an attempt to copy a double twist used in jade carving. It is successful in that, though the lines don't flow as smooth as jade, the silver has more corners and flat spots. The sterling necklace holds an emerald stone inside of a C with 4 directions spiraling to the center, setting the emerald. The matching sterling ring has a similar emerald resting on a large C set with 3 smaller Cs. I use sterling and gold in making violin bows, as well as some inlays. You may have noticed the odd piece of leather used in different spots. Being a luthier has given me the opportunity to incorporate a variety of materials as part of the instruments and standalone objects. I am looking forward to the challenge of being a juror in a year when only photos are being used to assess the pieces. I will miss not being able to hold, feel, turn, smell each object to trigger all my senses. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. Thanks for sharing your craft practice with us. I appreciate hearing about how you investigate new materials and concepts and then bring those into your work with instruments. We are going to move to a Q&A period, and my fellow exhibitions coordinator, Stephanie Canning, is going to start us off and then also facilitate any questions that come through the Q&A button. So feel free to ask any of your questions by clicking that Q&A button and sending us a question.
Okay, hi everybody. So I'm going to get us started with the Q&As. David, what is your favorite part of the process of creating a new piece?
My favorite part of the process is probably planning it out, and with a good concept, planning the concept and how I'm going to portray that and what materials I'm going to use. And then in the case of instruments, my favorite part is when I put strings on it and hear it for the first time, and then watching a customer pick it up and play it for the first time.
Wonderful. Do you have a current favorite instrument that you've built? Or a favorite type of guitar?
Probably not, because I'm not really a favorite person. I have a lot of different guitars, and they each serve a different function or purpose. And so depending what kind of music I want to play, I'll pick different instruments.
Great. Does anybody from any attendees have any questions? Just put them in the Q&A box and I will read them for David. Just double check here. So what is your favorite part of being a luthier teacher?
Luthier teacher. I think one of the favorite parts is, there's a couple of different ones. I really enjoy the fact that I'm teaching allows me to do a lot of experimentation and research on my own instruments, because every time I teach, I build an instrument as a demonstration and to set the pace. The pace is arduous, you might say. It's 8-hour days, but the shop is open longer, and for people who are simply learning to build a guitar and already know the tools, it's not so bad. But people that are learning to work with the tools as well, which is about 80% have never used tools, their learning curve is pretty steep. So I'm making my money there. And if I make an instrument that isn't necessarily going to sell, I can do a lot of research on it. Now, most of my research actually pans out pretty good, but I like that part. I really enjoy watching the lights come on in people when they're busy trying to figure something out, and then it's head. That's rewarding. And at the end of the whole process, because there's ups and downs, when they string up their guitar and play it, that's all pretty cool.
Yeah, that's very cool. Okay, we have a few questions from the crowd. Leah is asking, so interesting to see other art forms inform your work as a luthier. If you weren't building instruments, what would you be making?
Well, I always wanted, I don't think I'd have to build instruments. I would be making music. I would have to do something with music. I really enjoy working with all the different media that I work with. but music's a pretty big part of it all. So yeah, I would say I'd be making music, which is one thing I plan to do more of in the next few years.
Thank you. So Ron Cooley says, can you talk a little bit about the balance of science and art in your luthier practice?
Yeah, I could. There was the SaskTel, they do little big nights on artists, and they came in and they did one on me, and I think it's even on my website somewhere. And I talked about that balance in there, and they did some animation in the middle of their video. If you can find that video, watch it. It's quite humorous. In Lutherie, they talk about the spectrum of, on one side, you have science, and on the other side, you have magicians, and the spectrum runs in between. And I tend to be a middle of the road kind of person. So I'm a little bit of a magician because I really believe magic like helps the world go around. But science has a very respected way. And if you go back far enough in time, science and art were a lot closer linked than they are now. And science has kind of pushed art out of the way in trying to prove that everything has meaning, but there's so much of science that is still based on theories. So I have a lot of theories about things that apply to different properties of wood, but each tree grows individually in each individual spot. And so the properties within a tree have a huge variance, even though there's certain properties that are averaged out. So you've got to have a little bit of magic in your fingers in order to assess exactly what you're going to do with that particular piece of wood to bring out the best sound in it. Because your thicknesses range. If you're doing a piece of top or backwood, your thickness is only changed by 30 thousandths of an inch, which is only a 32nd of an inch. And it makes a huge difference. Like 10 thousandths of an inch makes a huge difference. So you get to balance that all out. And there's a certain amount of intuition. Some people will set up all kinds of tension gauges and do it scientifically that way. And that's way too time consuming for me. Does that work, Ron?
The next question I'm going to ask isn't in order because I feel like it kind of goes with what you're talking about. Cease Cote is asking, would different types of wood produce different sounds in the guitars?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Cease, for sure. Because that's what it's all about. Because traditionally, they've got certain woods that they only used, and to the point where Brazilian rosewood went on the CITES Treaty of Endangered Species in 1992. And so part of the whole thing is getting an understanding of the tonal qualities different woods have. And then what I said in the beginning about having a favorite part of planning something out is sitting down with somebody and watch them play and discuss with them, what is it that you want out of your sound? So if you ever tried to describe sound, it's very abstract and very difficult. And there's little nuances within a person's playing skills that need to be accented with the guitar, the instrument they're using. So then you plan out what woods you're going to use in that particular instrument. Back about 2012 or probably 2013, I went to Métiers des Arts de Luthier in Quebec City and did a 2.5-hour lecture on alternative woods. And the reason I was able to do that is that in my luthiery school, I had used a lot of alternative woods, and part of my practice is trying something out myself to assess it so that when I give it to students or present it to students, I have some background information that will expand their concepts with that wood and encourage them to use alternative woods instead of always using traditional woods. Is that enough?
Great. That's great. Thank you. How many students do you have in a normal year? Sorry, that question was asked by Janet. How many students do you have?
Okay, so I have 4 classes a year generally, and there's room for 7 students in each class. And I would say back in the beginning, I probably averaged about 22 students, but possible 28. I've trained my competition, and there's a lot of other luthiers that have begun schools. When I started there, I was one of 2 schools that I knew of in 1986. And now that's in Canada. And now there's a lot more people, and there's a lot of people doing 1 or 2 nights a week in big cities. So people that are living in big cities don't come. My whole concept of the teaching is Stan Tanawa told me in order to learn something, you need to go insane with it, which was his way of saying you need to put in your 10,000 hours. And so in 7 weeks, my shop opens at 6 a.m. and closes at 10 p.m., but I only do 40 hours a week of actual instruction and with weekend assignments. So all they do, it's an immersion course. All they do is build. And that's part of creating that 10,000 hours for them. In recent years, because of that competition, I've gone down. I probably average about 14 students a year these days. This year, I'm doing 5 courses all in a row, which is a lot for me. I decided partway through this year that this was going to be my last year teaching, and I'm going to spend a whole lot of time doing all those other things that I would do if I wasn't teaching and building instruments.
Okay, another question from Seth Freeman. In your years here, what do you think is unique about the art culture in Saskatchewan? What do you like, and where would you like to see growth?
Ooh, see, that's not fair because he's my son and he worked with me for 11 years. And I have pictures on the wall of him drilling a piece of wood when he was 3. So when I began, one of the first things I did was go and check out the SCC. I went to an annual general meeting and I thought that they were a little disorganized, but they'd been around for 6 years by then. And I've been a member ever since. And they had a vision about creating a structure for craftspeople and that whole discussion of when does craft become art, to evolve and have a voice in this province. Read me the question again, Steph, please.
In your years here, what do you think is unique about the art culture in Saskatchewan? What do you like, and where would you like to see growth?
Okay, the uniqueness, and this was thrown out at one of the shows I was at, like Wintergreen or Sundog. Somebody said, I think it was actually Sundog, somebody said, the cool thing about Saskatchewan is we all go off into these little rural hideouts and we do our thing. And we don't have a whole lot of outside influence. We just do our thing out of our head and with what we got. And then we all come together for something like a show or an exhibition, and we show everybody what we've got. Whereas if you're in a big city, you've got somebody does something and you get a whole bunch of copycat people right away because it sells, and the individual creativity isn't as great. And so I think Saskatchewan is really strong in that individuality of creating their own concepts and making them fly. And if you look at that, like all through the history of Saskatchewan, not just in art, but in other areas, it has set the pace for Canada in a lot of different things. Where would I like to see it go? I would like to see it continue to grow. My current big beef is that, and this is one of the things I find since 2003, is as the phone gained more popularity, to the point now in the last few years especially, the creativity of the people that I teach, I would say, is less individual, that instead of coming out of their head and creating something out of their head, they start doing research on the phone because they have the world at their fingertips. And so instead of being in the isolated rural setting, they're drawing from other influences that instead of their own self. So I would like to see growth in people being more creative from their within themselves and saying their own story, because ultimately that's what your life is about, is your own story.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. Okay, do you use more, sorry, from Cameron, do you use more traditional woodworking techniques using hand tools, or do you use more power tools? Do you find power tools separate you from the piece you are creating?
In my teaching, I teach mostly hand tools. In the initial course especially, I have a series of courses they can do. But in the initial course, I teach hand tools in a traditional way, a very traditional Spanish way of building an instrument. And the reason for that is you need to understand the wood. Okay, so we'll get back to wood, and it's all its different properties, and the way the tree is grown and the way you've harvested it, because not every tree can be used. And by using hand tools, you get a feel for that. Because if you go the wrong way and your tool digs into it, you can learn to turn around and go the other way. I used to take, before COVID, all my students to Sheldon Dingwall's factory in Saskatoon, and he has a CNC, and one of the things he says to the students on his tour, he's a really good tour if you ever get a chance to go, is that a power tool is nothing more than a chisel with a motor. And if you understand how a chisel works, then you can begin to program it to do things. Because if in a power tool, if you use it incorrectly on a piece of wood, you'll split it and wreck it really fast, a lot faster than you do by hand. So in my second class, if a second or third class of a student, they can use more power tools and get a feel for that, because in this day and age, and if you're running a shop, you're going to have to use some power tools. In my mail order, I definitely use more power tools. When I start just doing things on my own in the next couple of years, we'll just see how much power tools I use, because one of the favorite things that I like to do, Steph, is make a chisel cut. I did a chisel cut one day on a little curve on a headstock, and I thought, the cool thing about that is I get to do it again right away on the other side.
That's great, thank you. Ruth would like to know what kind of music you play. What kind of music do you play?
Ooh, I'm pretty eclectic. Mostly guitar. I've learned a couple songs on ukulele, and I've got some mandolins I plunk around with. I began with piano. I've tried to play classical, and I'm not really, my heart isn't in it. You know, you need a lot of background, and I don't have the background of classical. Through the 90s, I hung out with some flamenco dancers up in Saskatoon, and played a lot of flamenco guitar with them, and that was fun. I probably as a teenager played a lot of rock. I had an electric. The lady next door was looking for the radio that was on in her house one day, I was told, but it was just me playing. And lately I probably play more acoustic music. So I like blues. I have a resonator guitar I play blues on. I do a lot of finger picking. and you might call it folk, and not really much for country, although sometimes some of my songs can have a little bit of a country lilt to them. And I went through a reggae period. I'm working on a song right now that's really reggae. I need to get it recorded real quick for about the last 6 months. But yeah, I do a little bit of everything. I actually have a gig at Manitou, Little Manitou Gallery Art show on July 2nd, if you show up there, and you can
Awesome.
really see what I've got planned.
Would you be comfortable giving us a little sample right now?
Comfortable. Oh, I'm nervous as nervous. So Stephanie asked me like if I have a favorite instrument, and sorry, I choked up a bit. This is probably my current favorite instrument. The neck was made by a friend that I taught in '94. And she died of ALS and a few other things. The top, I gave her as a birthday present back in '94, and it was still in her pile of wood because she didn't really build that many guitars. She went home and repaired. The back came out of her pile of wood. She made me promise her husband that I would help him sort out his wood. So this is a flame figure. I'll just try and see. It's kind of book matched, so one side matches the other. And it's a walnut. So a walnut gives you a kind of a softer, mellower sound than a rosewood, and probably not as crispy, crunchy as a maple too. But the binding on the edge, see if I can get you a good view of the binding. Not really. The binding on the edge is maple, so it's a maple walnut guitar. And the neck was made. So I brought a bunch of wood home. Actually, right after the digital conference, I went up there and sorted through this wood and came home, and I built this guitar for her daughter, who has a band called Major Funk and the Employment. If you Google that, you'll listen to some really good music. So because of COVID, I still have this guitar, and I dug it out in order to play today, because Steffi said that she wanted to hear me play. So how's that? Is that good? So it has lots of sustain. It's a pretty nice guitar. It has a side port, so I can open and close this side port. And there it is closed. I don't know, do you hear any difference? I'll play it louder. Probably not, because if I turned it this way, you might hear more difference. This is closed, and this is open. So anyways,
That was wonderful. Thank you.
You're very welcome. What else you got for me, Steph?
Okay, we have a few more questions. Vivian is asking, is it going to be challenging judging dimensions online for the very first time? Are you feeling ready for the experience leading dimensions in this new direction?
Yes. Of course, Vivian. I wouldn't have said yes if I didn't think I could do it. I sat through a lot of Dimension Jurors presentations, you know, and I've in that process, I think I and other craftspeople are busy judging the jurors. So I expect everybody out there with an entry to do that to me when it all comes down the tube. And one of the things that I always wanted to see as a juror that could remain objective through all the different media and not favorite out the things that they influence the most. I was never very good at saying, oh, this juror is going to be there, so I'm going to build this for whatever they like because they like that kind of stuff. I just did my thing and did it. And I've always wondered what it would be like to be a juror. So I really kind of in a spot where I'm not going to get to jury like I really want a jury because I can't touch this stuff. I can't see it. I can't feel the weight of it. And to do that out of a picture is a really, really tough thing to do. And so Seth's online and he built my website for me. If you go on my website, I have a lot of pictures of wood. And one of the big complaints when we started it was I needed more pictures. And it's a long process to take really good pictures that really, really give dimension and the true representation of a piece. And as a picture taker, because we take our own here, it's a tough thing. And that background, I think, will help me to look at things. But it's a flat picture for sure. It's going to be a very tough jurying session in that regard. But at the same time, I mean, somebody's got to do it. And they asked me and I said, yeah. I was afraid if I didn't say that, they'd never ask me again.
Maybe we'll secretly let you touch something in the gallery once it's all up.
Whoa. Yeah, that's a little late.
Yeah, I know. There's a few more questions here. I don't know how much time we have left for questions. But Janie Himsel would like to know, how many luthiers are there in Canada?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have no idea. I couldn't even tell you how many customers I have in my customer base, but I do have new names showing up regularly, ordering wood. There is a lot. There's a lot more than what you think. I have no idea. There's like if you go to a show in Vancouver or Montreal, people do come up from the States for those shows, but there is a lot of luthiers at those shows. They'll have like 140 people showing, and they've all had to be juried into the show. You don't just walk in. And if you go to shows in the States, there's a lot of Canadians, highly respected Canadians at those shows too. So Canada's lutherie scene is pretty big.
Great, thank you. Ron Cooley has another question. He says, you've talked a little bit about alternative woods. What are some alternative woods you've discovered that create happy sonic surprises?
Happy sonic surprises. Top woods. Okay, traditionally they use spruce. They use Engelmann spruce or Sitka spruce or Adirondack spruce. I started using a little bit of Douglas fir. I had a student that went into cutting wood and selling wood out of central BC. And he sent me some Douglas fir. I had another student that phoned me up and they were cutting panels for somebody's house, and there was 4 feet cutoffs. There were 24 inches wide, and so he cut some of those into tops for me because my saw will only cut about 11 inches. And I was amazed at what the Douglas fir wood did. That one guitar with the Timeless Tea and Holly, that top is Douglas fir, and it's a one-piece top if you look carefully at it. And so Douglas fir has been pretty cool to discover. Also white pine I used in a flamenco, one of the first flamencos I built, and I kept that for myself and played it for a lot of years, and everybody commented on the sound of that. The back and sides for that were yellow cedar, which is Canadian cypress. Spanish cypress is used in traditionally Spain flamencos. So it's a similar wood, and the combination of those two is pretty tight. And the Spanish or the Canadian cypress can be used for top wood as well. In backs and sides, I brought in a bunch of ancient kauri from New Zealand, which is wood that's been buried for 40,000 years in a bog, and they've been digging it up and selling it, and it's still good. It's a little bit cardboardy over being woody, but it still makes a decent guitar. It's quite mellow, so I wouldn't put it into the supersonic category. My current supersonic is Tasmanian Blackwood. I've been importing that and building out of that, and it has a pretty strong sound. I like that. I have one set of African Blackwood, which is a true rosewood, and I haven't built with it yet. I have a friend who builds nothing but classical guitars, and he said that's his favorite wood to build out of. He built one that had an 11-piece back, which normally there are only 2, and he really likes it. So I'm looking forward to trying that. I think that's a supersonic wood.
Great, thank you. Shane has asked, can you speak to your sculpture work and specifically your jade work?
My sculpture work. If you ever go to New Zealand, everybody in New Zealand wears jade. You know, when I went there first in 2003, everybody sketched. I took a sketchbook just off the top of my head because I wanted something that I could carry that was artistic, and I hadn't sketched for a while. And I discovered that like everybody carried sketchbooks, and they would trade sketchbooks and they'd put sketches in, and everybody wore jade because it's traditionally a Maori stone, and it's very reverent with the Maoris, to the point where now only Maoris can harvest it out of the rivers. And so I went and learned to carve jade. I wanted to carve jade, and I think in 2007 I went and carved my first jade. And I just find it kind of fascinating. Stone carving's always kind of fascinated me, but jade is one of the reasons they wear it is because it's supposed to make your heart kind. So I thought, well, I better wear some because I could use a bit of that. And the designs, some of the designs I used are things that I would sketch in my sketchbook, that I would observe in people here and there, and then put them into jade. When I went down, I would study with a guy down in Hokitika, which is the jade capital there. And tried always to do, I would spend about 5 days with him and do the more difficult aspects of jade carving. It's what I like about it is you're trying to create 3-dimension on a very, very, very flat surface. You know, you might have something that's 6 millimeters or 1/4 inch thick, and you're trying to make a big 3-dimensional thing out of it. And the whale's tails, I've used a lot of whale's tails because anything to do with the sea is really big down there. And that last whale, that double twist whale's tail that was hanging in the window, when I was doing that, one of the Maoris that was in the shop says, you don't see people doing whale's tails anymore. And we talked about that. And it's like a lot of people are doing simpler designs. Whale's tails are really tough to make look really good. And they're in catering to the tourism thing, they're making simpler designs out of jade. And I like to be more complex.
Great, thank you. Cease has another question. Would the maturity level of a guitarist determine or influence the type of guitar sound that they gravitate to?
Oh God, how do I know that? The maturity level. I don't think any guitarists are mature at all, Cease. They're all just still kids that are in adult bodies. What determines what somebody likes? I don't know. I really don't know how to answer that. I think a person's taste actually changes through the years, you know. Like I don't play as loud a music as I used to, but every now and then I like playing loud music. I wear more earplugs than I used to.
Okay, so this is our last question of the night. Is there one piece of advice you'd like to give emerging or early career craftspeople?
Yeah. I think that what I would say is have a really clear vision of what you want to do in the short term in planning projects or in developing your skills, but and a little bit of long-term scope to that of where you want to be in maybe 1 year or 5 years or 10 years. But in that 10-year, 5-year process, you want to be willing to adjust your vision to the things that came up. Because things come up. You know, when I started my school, I was converting a 2-car garage into a shop, and my wife wanted to park her car inside, and so I told her I would build a car park if I could have the whole shop instead of just a bit of it. And I invented the school as part of the reason why I wanted to have the whole shop. And she wanted to develop the school over 10 years. And I said, no, we need to do it like right now because we need to make some money out of it so that in 10 years it's something. And in 10 years, by 1996, the school was a lot bigger than I ever expected it to be. I definitely never had the vision of going to New Zealand to teach Lutherie. Things like that just happen. But in the short term, if you really focus on what you want to do and how you want to develop, all those other things fall into place and makes life pretty cool.
Thank you so much, David.
You're very welcome.
All right. Thank you again, David, for talking with us tonight and answering all those questions in such a thoughtful manner. It was also, it was so joyful to listen to you play. So thank you for that. That was lovely.
Oh, you're welcome.
I just realized I haven't heard live, quote unquote, music in so long. It was great. And thank you again for agreeing to be one of our jurors, especially during such a strange year. Thank you to our audience for those wonderful questions. Now I'll just do some end of night housekeeping. If you haven't yet, please consider registering for Jane Kidd's jurors presentation in just a few days on April 16th at 7 p.m. Steph will put the registration link in the chat right now. That will disappear when I close the meeting, so consider opening it up right now so you don't lose track of it. Next week, we will begin jurying. In our effort to provide most of the structure that our usual Dimensions program brings, we have created an online open house where the public can still view all the entries. This will be live on our website from April 19th to May 2nd. We will also be providing a free public virtual critique on Saturday, May 1st at 2 p.m. The registration link for that will also be in the chat. Thank you, Steph. The Dimensions 2021 exhibition will officially open on May 26th at the Saskatchewan Craft Council Gallery. Please keep an eye on our newsletters and social media for updates about the awards announcements. We're so proud to be able to offer this program this year, despite the challenges and the challenges of moving it to an online format. So thank you, artists and craftspeople who support us by participating in our programming. It really means a lot to us. A recording of this presentation is going to be made available on YouTube. So if you know anyone who couldn't attend tonight, let them know that they will be able to access the recording at a later date. Thank you once more to Creative Saskatchewan and the City of Saskatoon, and especially to David.
Thank you.